who was actually in the classroom. The word trust gets used a lot when we talk about teachers. After a while, it becomes a piece of furniture in the room, something you stop noticing because it has always been there. But the specific trust that a parent extends when their child walks through a school building door is not a generic kind of trust. It is a trust built from a specific power dynamic that the school environment creates. The teacher controls the space. The teacher controls the schedule. The teacher controls who goes where and when. The teacher controls the narrative that comes home. The four people in today's episode understood exactly how much power that gave them. And in four completely different ways, across four states and four categories of evil, they used it. Today's four cases span 5 years in four different crime categories. They do not share a profile, a method, or a state. What they share is a specific exploitation of the trust that brought children within reach. A Chattanooga English teacher who groomed a 12-year-old student while under active investigation for an identical offense at his prior school and who was hired by the second school despite explicit internal knowledge of that investigation, sentenced to 19 years in federal prison in March 2025. A Merritt, Illinois special education teacher and soccer coach who used her dual access to a 15-year-old as both his tutor and his coach to commit sexual abuse more than 50 times, starting when he was 14 years old, until the day his mother bought him a new phone and old text messages appeared on the screen. A California robotics teacher who spent 3 years installing hidden cameras in his school's bathrooms and in the hotel rooms where he took his underage students during out-of-state tournaments, watching and downloading hundreds of videos of children in states of undress, including children under 12, sentenced to 17 and a half years in federal prison and lifetime supervised release in September 2024. And 6 school employees at a Longview, Texas elementary school who ran what prosecutors described as a classroom like a prison for the most vulnerable children in the building, the nonverbal and the autistic, students who could not tell anyone what was happening and who were only discovered because one mother, unsatisfied with the scratches on her son's back, hid a recording device in his backpack. Every case in today's episode is drawn from court records, Department of Justice official releases, verified journalism, and official statements from prosecutors and law enforcement. The final case in today's episode reached its most recent verdict just 23 days before this episode was recorded. It is the freshest material this channel has ever covered, and it matters because the judge's reaction to the sentencing says something about what the courts actually feel when the most vulnerable children in a school building are targeted by the people who are supposed to protect them most. Before the first case, I want you to track one thing across all 4 situations. At what point did someone outside these educators know, or have reason to know, that something was wrong, and what happened with that information? The answer is different in all 4 cases, but it is present in all 4. Tell me what you find in the comments. They saw the flag. They hired him anyway. Chattanooga, Tennessee, 2023 to 2025. Sentence March 2025. February 16th, 2023. Chattanooga, Tennessee. East Lake Academy, a public elementary and middle charter school serving about 600 students in Hamilton County. A Chattanooga Police Department investigator responds to a complaint that a teacher has been making inappropriate contact with a 12-year-old student. The teacher is 30-year-old Kenya White, an English language arts teacher at the school. What the investigator finds is a 3-day text exchange starting February 13th, in which White used his phone to attempt to persuade the 12-year-old to take explicit images of himself and send them to White. The messages are on the student's phone. White is placed on a disciplinary hold. His employment is suspended pending a law enforcement investigation. The Tennessee Department of Children's Services opens a parallel investigation. And then, approximately 11 months later, Kenya White started a new job as an 8th-grade guided reading teacher at Chattanooga Preparatory School. That transition from suspended under investigation at one Chattanooga charter school to employed as a teacher at another is a fact that defines this case beyond White's individual crimes. Chat Prep ran his name through a state portal during its hiring process. The disciplinary hold from East Lake Academy appeared. Internal emails obtained by Local 3 News, the investigative unit that broke this story, documented what happened next with a specificity that is almost impossible to read charitably. One email said, "We cannot hire him while he is under review," and "We will need to terminate Mr. White this week." A second employee replied, "Let us discuss this before he is terminated." Instead of terminating White, Chat Prep hired him. He was listed as a guided reading teacher for the 2024 to 2025 school year on the school's website. The background check had shown the flag. The school hired him anyway. The second victim in the federal case. Almost exactly 2 years after the initial investigation at Eastlake Academy, a student at Chat Prep reported to a school counselor that he had received inappropriate messages from White. A second law enforcement investigation opened. Federal investigators determined across the full scope of the case that White had 2 documented victims. The 12-year-old at Eastlake Academy who had been the subject of the 2023 complaint, and a second student at Chat Prep who was victimized during the period when White was employed there despite the flag. White was arrested in February 2025 and indicted on multiple federal charges including kidnapping, sexual exploitation of a minor, and solicitation of a minor. White entered a guilty plea to enticement of a minor and sexual exploitation of a minor as part of a federal plea agreement. On March 5, 2025, United States District Judge Curtis Collier sentenced White to 225 months, 18 years, and 9 months, approximately 19 years in federal prison. He was additionally ordered to complete sex offender programming, substance abuse treatment, and mental health evaluation during incarceration. State charges filed by Hamilton County District Attorney Coty Womp were dropped after the federal conviction, as Womp's office confirmed the federal prosecution had achieved a longer sentence than state proceedings would likely have produced. White must register as a sex offender upon release and will serve a minimum of 5 years supervised release. At the sentencing hearing, Judge Collier said, "The last thing parents need to worry about is sending their children to school to become sexual objects. What happened to the school?" Following White's arrest, Chat Prep Principal Diamond Kelly was placed on administrative leave. Human Resources Coordinator Dr. Angel Netta Ulmer took early retirement. Tennessee Representative John Ray Clemens formally requested the state to investigate the school's hiring practices. A civil lawsuit was filed against Chat Prep and its leadership on behalf of White's second victim. None of those actions changed the fact that an internal email had said we cannot hire him while he is under review. A second employee had said let us discuss this. And a discussion had produced a teaching position for a man under active DCS investigation for grooming a 12-year-old. The specific term that federal law uses in cases like this one, pass in the trash, is not a new concept. The United States Department of Education published a study on the practice in 2022, examining state policies designed to prevent schools from allowing teachers with documented misconduct to simply move to a different district or school system with no warning attached to their records. The study examined the gaps in those policies. The Kenya White case represents what happens when a gap in that kind of system is not just a bureaucratic oversight but a conscious choice. The email said we cannot hire him. Someone said let us discuss this first, and the discussion produced a hire. The background check process did exactly what it was supposed to do. It showed the flag. The institution looked at the flag and decided to have a conversation instead of acting on it. The conversation produced a second victim. Kenya White was under an active DCS investigation when Chat Prep hired him. An internal email said the school could not hire him while under review. Someone said let's discuss it first. He was hired. A second student was victimized. The principal is on administrative leave. The HR coordinator retired. 19 years in federal prison for White. The question this case raises is not primarily about White. It is about the institution that read the flag and hired him. What should the legal and professional consequences be for school administrators who knowingly hire a teacher with an active investigation for crimes against students? Tell me in the comments. 2023, Eastlake Academy. A 12-year-old. 3 days of explicit texts. A disciplinary hold. An active DCS investigation. An internal email. We cannot hire him while he is under review. A second email. Let us discuss this first. Chattanooga Preparatory School hired him. A second student, a second investigation, 225 months in federal prison. The judge said the last thing parents need to worry about is sending their children to school to become sexual objects. The principal was placed on leave. The HR coordinator retired. The law addressed Kenya White. The question this case asks is who addresses a school that hired him anyway? She called him a stalker on the day she was arrested. Downers Grove, Illinois, 2023 to 2025, 55 charges. Trial pending. March 15, 2025. Downers Grove, Illinois, a western suburb of Chicago in DuPage County. A mother buys her son a new phone to replace one that broke. When she signs into the iCloud account and the old messages populate, she finds a text thread with a phone number she does not recognize. No name, no profile photo. She reads the messages. She brings her son in and asks about them. He tells her. She takes him to the Downers Grove Police Department that same day. The police interview him. They contact the DuPage County Children's Advocacy Center. The boy discloses. The woman whose number was in that thread is 30-year-old Christina Formella, a special education teacher at Downers Grove South High School, where the boy is a student. She is also his soccer coach. She has been his tutor. She has access to him through 3 separate roles simultaneously. The abuse, he tells investigators, began approximately a year and a half ago when he was 14 years old. On March 16th, 2025, the day after the report, Downers Grove police initiated a traffic stop on Formella's vehicle. Body camera footage from the arrest, which circulated nationally after its release, shows the moment the officer approaches the driver's window. Formella's husband is in the passenger seat. They are on their way somewhere together. The officer tells her to exit the vehicle. She is confused. He says, "I know you're confused. I'll explain everything to you." She gets out. She is handcuffed. She is placed in the back of the police car. In the back seat, with the body camera audio still running, she asks the officers, "Am I in trouble? Is my husband coming with me?" She wraps her arms around her knees and begins to cry. She tells him she feels like she is going to throw up. What the evidence showed. Formella was initially charged with 1 count of criminal sexual assault and 2 counts of aggravated criminal sexual abuse. She appeared in court, pleaded not guilty, and was released with conditions: no contact with anyone under 18, no access to Downers Grove South. The investigation continued. In May 2025, a DuPage County grand jury returned a sealed indictment containing 52 additional charges, unsealed in June 2025, bringing the total to 55. 20 counts of criminal sexual assault, 20 counts of aggravated criminal sexual abuse, 6 counts of indecent solicitation of a child, and 6 counts of grooming. Each assault count carries a mandatory 4 to 15-year sentence upon conviction. The charge total reflects what investigators found. Sexual contact had occurred at least 50 times, including at least 4 to 5 times inside Downers Grove South High School, and multiple additional times at Formella's private residence, sometimes during school hours. Assistant District Attorney Jacqueline McAndrew, presenting the expanded charges, described Formella to the court as unbelievably conniving and unbelievably controlling. She said Formella had sent the boy texts telling him she did not intend to remain in her marriage, that her husband was having an affair, would leave, and she would have millions of dollars, while simultaneously texting the boy from a honeymoon in Italy. McAndrew said there was a text about the 2 of them almost being caught by another teacher. There was evidence Formella had told the boy about a neighbor facing similar charges and expressed fear she would be charged herself. Detectives reviewing Formella's phone had found a notes app containing what amounted to a personal diary about the student, entries referencing him by name and documenting what the prosecutor described as a relationship Formella had deliberately constructed and controlled over nearly 2 years. What she said at her first court appearance. Formella told the court that everybody comes after her because she is good-looking and that she is simply a good person who cared too much about the victim. She told police in her initial interview that the boy was a stalker and that the explicit references in her notes app were a way for her to process her anxiety and were not about the student. She said the explicit messages found on his phone had been placed there by the boy himself as part of a blackmail scheme. She said this on the day of her arrest. The grand jury, presented with 55 counts of documented evidence, did not find the explanation sufficient. Formella resigned from Downers Grove South High School and voluntarily surrendered her teaching license. She remains on pre-trial release pending trial. As conditions of her release, she wears a GPS monitor, has monitoring software on all her devices, and cannot contact anyone under 18 or approach the victim at his home, school, or workplace. If convicted on all counts, she faces a minimum of 60 years in prison. Trial proceedings were still ongoing as of early 2026. The student she is accused of abusing was 14 years old when it started. He was her soccer player, her tutoring client, and her classroom student. She sent him texts from her honeymoon. She kept a diary about him on her phone. His mother found the thread on a replacement device and drove him to the police station the same day. There is a specific quality to the Formella case that the charge list alone does not fully communicate. The charge list says 50 incidents and 55 counts. What those numbers represent in the day-to-day life of a 14-year-old is approximately 18 months of sustained manufactured relationship inside every space where that student was supposed to be learning. His classroom, his soccer field, his tutoring sessions, his after-school activities, all of those spaces were used. All of those roles, teacher, coach, tutor, were the access mechanisms. DuPage County State's Attorney Robert Berlin said of the initial charging announcement, it is alleged that she used a position of trust and authority as a tutor and a coach to sexually assault a minor student. The type of abuse and behavior alleged in this case will not be tolerated. The 55 charges say exactly how many times it allegedly occurred. The spaces where it allegedly occurred say something about how thoroughly a teacher's role, used deliberately, can saturate every part of a student's school day. A mother bought her son a new phone. The old messages loaded on the new device. She read a text thread with no name attached. She took her son to the police station the same day. 55 charges followed. The teacher called the boy a stalker. The prosecutor called her unbelievably conniving and controlling. She is awaiting trial while wearing a GPS monitor. He was 14 years old when it started. She was his tutor, his soccer coach, and his classroom teacher. 3 access points, none of which required any unusual breach of protocol to exploit. What does this case say about how schools monitor the after-hours access that coaches and tutors have to students? Tell me in the comments. A new phone, an iCloud backup, a text thread with no name, a mother who read it and drove her son to the police station. Body camera. I know you are confused. I will explain everything to you. Am I in trouble? Is my husband coming with me? She felt like she was going to throw up. 55 charges. At least 50 incidents. 4 to 5 of them at the school. A diary about the student in the Notes app. Text from a honeymoon. She called him a stalker. He was 14 when it started. She resigned and surrendered her license. She wears a GPS monitor. The diary was on her phone the whole time. He took the cameras on the field trip. Beckman High School, Irvine, California, 2020 to 2023. Sentence September 10, 2024. February 2020. Irvine, California. Beckman High School in Orange County, a large public high school in a planned suburban community that consistently ranks among the safest cities in the United States. Sue Kongsit, 35 years old, is a teacher and the school's robotics team coach. In February 2020, he begins installing hidden cameras in the school's bathrooms. Not one, multiple bathrooms across the campus. He installs them, returns regularly to view the footage, downloads the videos that are of interest to him, and stores the recordings on external drives at his home in Rowland Heights. He does this for 3 years. From February 2020 through February 2023, 36 months, while teaching his classes and coaching his robotics team, while parents were driving their children to school on Monday mornings and trusting the institution with everything that trust implies, the cameras ran. In that 3-year period, federal prosecutors confirmed, viewed, and downloaded hundreds of images of children and adults in various states of undress using the school's restrooms. Some of the student victims were under 18. Some were under 12. The cameras captured what school bathrooms are used for. Students in a space they were required to be and had every reason to believe was private. None of them knew he had placed cameras there. None of them knew their teacher was watching. He took the cameras to Texas. In May 2022, the Beckman High School robotics team qualified for an out-of-state tournament in Texas. Sit traveled with the team as head coach. The team stayed at a hotel. Sit installed a hidden camera in the restroom of the hotel room, where his minor students were staying during the tournament. He then viewed and downloaded footage from that camera as well. The out-of-state installation took the conduct from a school-based offense into the territory of federal law. He had transported the means of exploitation across state lines while supervising minor students, extending his surveillance to a space those students occupied while under his direct care. The hotel bathroom in Texas became part of the federal case because of that specific crossing. The cameras at Beckman High School were discovered in February 2023, 3 years after the first one was installed. A campus maintenance worker found a hidden device in a bathroom near the school's swimming pool deck. That single discovery triggered an immediate law enforcement response. Investigators from the Irvine Police Department and Homeland Security Investigations executed a search warrant at Sit's home in Rowland Heights. They seized multiple digital devices, external storage drives, and the cameras themselves. The forensic review went significantly beyond the school footage. On one of SIT's hard drives, investigators found 22 images and one video depicting a toddler engaged in sexual activity. A second hard drive contained at least 150 images and 4 videos of child sexual abuse material. SIT owned all the devices. He was the sole user. The guilty plea and the sentence. Siu Kong SIT pleaded guilty on March 29, 2024 to 1 count of possession of child pornography, the charge that encompassed the most serious material found on his personal devices. On September 10, 2024, United States District Judge John W. Holcomb sentenced SIT to 210 months in federal prison, 17 and a half years, followed by a lifetime of supervised release. The Orange County District Attorney's Office filed additional state charges related to adult victims captured in the hidden camera footage, on which SIT pleaded not guilty in Orange County Superior Court. United States Attorney Martin Estrada said at sentencing, this defendant was every parent's nightmare. Rather than care for the safety and well-being of students, he exploited them in the most abhorrent way. Raquel Cooper, an attorney representing 4 of SIT's former student victims in a civil lawsuit against the school district, described what the case had produced in her clients. Some no longer want to participate in swimming, water polo, or robotics activities that had defined their school experience because of what they now know happened while they were doing them. Some feel constantly as though they are being watched. Some are scared to use public bathrooms and changing rooms. They just feel a complete violation of privacy and safety. Cooper said, at one of the places they should have felt safe. Cooper also said there were at least 50 opportunities for someone at the school to notice that SIT was spending an inordinate amount of time with students outside normal class hours, befriending them on social media, staying with them beyond what the job required. She said, somebody should have seen something. The cameras had been there for 3 years. A maintenance worker found the first one. Hidden cameras in school bathrooms for 3 full years. Hundreds of images downloaded. The cameras extended to a hotel in Texas during a field trip. Children under 12 among the victims. The cameras were found by a maintenance worker, not by any monitoring of the teacher's conduct. His devices contain material beyond the school footage, involving children far younger than his own students. The civil lawsuit says there were 50 opportunities for someone to notice. The robotics team coach was in Irvine for 36 months. Does your school district monitor teacher-student social media relationships outside school hours? Tell me in the comments. February 2020. Beckman High School. A robotics coach. Hidden cameras in school bathrooms. 3 years. Hundreds of images. Children under 12. A field trip to Texas. A hotel bathroom. A camera installed where students slept. A maintenance worker found the first camera near the swimming pool deck in February 2023. 3 years after the first one was placed. A search of his home. Storage drives. More material. Toddlers. 210 months. 17 and a half years. Lifetime supervised release. Students who no longer use public bathrooms. Students scared to change for swimming. The attorney said there were 50 opportunities for someone to see. Nobody saw. He saw. For 3 years. She hid a recorder in his backpack. J.L. Everhart Elementary School, Longview, Texas, 2019 to 2021, final sentencing February 27, 2026. Spring of 2021, Longview, Texas, J.L. Everhart Elementary School in the Longview Independent School District. A mother of a student enrolled in the school's life skills classroom, the self-contained classroom serving children with the most significant support needs, nonverbal autistic students, students with severe cognitive and physical disabilities, students who cannot report what is happening to them because their disability has removed that option, notices scratches on her son's back. She asked the school. She is given explanations she does not find adequate. She notices other things. She continues asking and continues finding the answers insufficient. What she does next is a reason this case was ever discovered. She hides a recording device in her son's backpack and sends him to school. Her act of putting that device in that backpack is a reason 6 school employees face criminal charges. The reason 11 students in that classroom have any form of legal acknowledgement of what was done to them, and the reason this case has a record at all. The recording became the first piece of evidence that led Longview ISD's IT department to pull the classroom security camera footage. Cameras have been installed in the life skills classroom in August 2021 after a Texas state law change required them in special education classrooms. The school's IT director, Brian Pitts, who had served in that role for 28 years, testified at trial that within 72 hours of being asked to pull the footage, he had begun reviewing it. The October 7th recording was what triggered an expanded review. What that review produced, across weeks of classroom recordings, is what prosecutors described at the February 2026 trial as a classroom run like a prison. What the cameras showed. The trial of two former J.L. Everhart principals, Cassandra Renee James, 51, and Linda K. Lister, 63, began February 24, 2026 in the 188th District Court in Gregg County before Judge Scott Novy. Prosecutors presented 50 videos as evidence. The footage showed students being dragged across the classroom floor, students being taken into a smaller storage room of the main classroom where no camera operated, but where, on the recordings, a child could be heard wailing and crying while an adult voice yelled, "Sit down." Students struck with cardboard tubes. In one recording, a student who had removed his mask during the pandemic was on the floor, and a school employee sprayed him with Lysol and hit him with a can. A physical therapist who worked with students in the building, Julia Bitting, testified about a specific morning, August 30th, 2021, weeks into her job. She heard a loud bang and then a shrill cry from the direction of the life skills classroom. It was not like anything she had heard before. She went looking for the principal, could not find her, and found the assistant principal instead. She asked whether the cameras were on. She said, "I think you need to look at them because something just happened in that room." The 6 who were charged. 6 Longview ISD employees were charged with injury to a child in connection with the abuse of 11 life skills students. Principal Cassandra James, Curriculum Coordinator Linda K. Lister, who functioned as the assistant principal, Teacher's Aide Cynthia Denise Talley, Teacher's Aide Paula Dixon Hawkins, Special Education Teacher Cecilia Gregg, and IB Teacher Priscilla Rosa Johnson. Talley pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Dixon Hawkins pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Gregg pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. All 3 are incarcerated. Johnson's case remains pending, with a status hearing scheduled for May 6, 2026. James and Lister pleaded not guilty and went to trial. Longview Police Detective Deborah Stiles, who handles crimes against children, testified that when she arrived at J.L. Everhart to begin her investigation, a Longview ISD attorney was already on site interviewing subjects. She said she felt there was more to the story. She testified that parents had reported their children were afraid of Lister because of paddling. She said her investigation could have been more complete as she had reached the school before the district's own internal interview process had already begun. On February 26, 2026, the jury returned unanimous guilty verdicts against both James and Lister on charges of injury to a child. The sentencing that made the judge visibly angry. The sentencing phase took place February 27, 2026. The jury deliberated for approximately 1 hour and returned a recommendation probation for both defendants, 10 years of probation and a $10,000 fine for each. The jury had the option to recommend up to 7 years in prison for James and up to 10 years for Lister. They chose probation. Judge Scott Novy, visibly dissatisfied with the recommendation, confirmed the probated sentences but added a specific additional condition for Lister. Looking at her from a bench, he said, "In my mind, your case is different." He told her, "You are going to come back at 5 p.m. Monday." He ordered her to report to the Gregg County Jail as a condition of her probation, with a potential duration of that jail time up to 180 days. 3 of the 6 employees who directly harmed nonverbal and autistic children in the life skills classroom received prison sentences of 5 to 8 years. The 2 principals who ran the institution where it happened, who had been in the building while all of it was occurring, who had received warnings from a physical therapist in August 2021 about sounds coming from the classroom, received probation. The judge expressed his dissatisfaction on the record and added jail to one of the probation sentences. 3 mothers of life skills students waited in the courtroom on February 27, 2026, for the jury to come back. The abuse that preceded the installation of the classroom cameras from 2019 to August 2021, before the state law requiring cameras took effect, was captured in no footage reported by no nonverbal student, and exists in the record only because a mother noticed scratches on her son's back and was not satisfied with the explanation she was given. She put a recorder in a backpack. That is the only reason any of the 11 students in that classroom have a case number. The disparity in the outcomes: prison for the 3 teachers' aides and the special education teacher who pleaded, probation for the 2 principals who stood trial, is one that the judge himself addressed by adding a jail condition to list as probation and by saying on the record that in his mind her case was different. The question the sentencing leaves open is whether probation adequately reflects the specific responsibility of a building's leadership for what happens inside that building's most vulnerable classroom. The parents who were in the courtroom that day had already spent 5 years in a process that began when one of them put a recording device in a backpack. The children who could not communicate what was happening in that room are, as of the date of this recording, in their preteen and teenage years. The cameras that are now in every Texas special education classroom are there because of a law that did not exist when the abuse began in 2019. A mother noticed scratches. She asked. She was not satisfied. She had a recorder in a backpack. That started the chain that produced 6 criminal cases, 50 videos of classroom evidence, 3 prison sentences, and a unanimous guilty verdict against 2 principals. The children harmed before the cameras were installed in August 2021. During the 2 years from 2019 to 2021 when there was no camera and the student could not speak for themselves, are the invisible part of this case. How many similar classrooms with similar students exist in districts without camera requirements? Tell me in the comments. A mother noticed scratches. She asked questions. She did not accept the answers. She put a recorder in a backpack. The IT director pulled the footage within 72 hours. 50 videos. Students dragged across floors. A storage room. A child heard wailing. Sit down. A can of Lysol used as a weapon. A physical therapist who heard a loud bang and a shrill cry and found Lister instead of James and asked if the cameras were on. 6 school employees charged. 3 in prison. 5 years, 8 years, 8 years. 2 principals convicted by unanimous jury. Sentenced to probation. The judge said, "In my mind, your case is different." He ordered one to jail. The mothers of 3 students sat in the courtroom and waited for the jury to come back. The students in that classroom from 2019 to 2021 could not tell anyone what was happening. A mother with a recorder in a backpack is the reason any of them have a case number. Who was actually in the classroom? 4 cases. 4 schools. 4 completely different forms of conduct that exploited the trust of children and the institutions that were supposed to protect them. And in all 4, the same question underneath: how long did it take someone to notice, and why did it take that long? At Eastlake Academy, the investigation began when a student complaint was received in February 2023 and produced a documented disciplinary hold that a second school read, discussed, and then ignored for 11 months while White began targeting a second student. At Downers Grove South, the abuse began when the victim was 14 and ran for approximately 18 months before his mother found the messages by accident on a replacement phone. At Beckman High School, the cameras ran for 3 years and were discovered by a maintenance worker, not by any monitoring of the teacher's conduct or any supervisory observation. At Jail Everhart, the abuse ran from 2019 to 2021 before a mother's recording device and a state-mandated classroom camera law produced the first documented evidence. These are not failures of vigilance in the dramatic sense. They are failures of systems that were not built to detect the specific conduct they were facing. The background check system did not prevent a school from hiring a teacher whose flag was visible in it. The school communication platform did not flag a 2-year exchange. The school maintenance schedule produced one discovery. Decades of normal operation produced no others. The classroom camera law took effect in 2021. The abuse had begun 2 years earlier. The gap between when the conduct started and when it was discovered is a space where the trust was being exploited, and the systems were not closing it. There is something worth naming about the specific population of victims in today's 4 cases. In the Kenya White case, the victims were students who trusted a teacher on a school communication platform. In the Formella case, the victim trusted someone who held 3 simultaneous roles over him: teacher, tutor, and coach, and who used all 3. In the Sick case, the victims used their school's bathrooms, which is not a voluntary act, and were surveilled in the most private space a school contains. And in the Longview case, the victims were children with the most significant disabilities in the building, children who, for many of them, could not describe to a parent what was happening in their classroom. The mother who put the recorder in the backpack did not know what she would find. She just knew that the scratches were there and the explanations were not good enough. That specific combination, a mother's refusal to accept an inadequate answer and a recorder the size of a small device in a child's bag, is the only reason the case is a record. The children who were harmed in the 2 years before the cameras were installed may never have that. What law enforcement and the courts produce, in each case, is the outcome that follows when the system eventually does close. 19 years in federal prison. A pending trial carrying a minimum of 60 years in exposure. 17 and a half years in federal prison and lifetime supervised release. Prison sentences of 5 and 8 years for 3 who pleaded. Probation for 2 administrators that made a judge visibly angry enough to order one of them to jail on a Monday morning. None of those outcomes returns what was taken from the students in these 4 cases. But they are the specific answer the legal system is designed to give when the people entrusted with the education and safety of children use that trust to harm them instead. Tell me in the comments which of today's 4 situations you think the existing systems were most equipped to catch earlier, and what would have had to change for them to catch it. New episode coming. See you in the next one.